All right. I think we're warm. All right, we're back with another episode. But first, the sponsors, as always. We got to thank Blackwater Ammunition. Appreciate them. Rhino Metals for all the tables. Everything you see here, Rhino Metals, they are amazing. Love those guys. Got to thank Gallo Technologies. Love the panels behind us. Everybody else does too. These things are phenomenal. Volquartsen Firearms. Scott Volquartsen. Awesome. Go check them out. Love you, Scott. And we do have a code for Manscaped. It's 20 off if you're going to look into that. Special thanks to them, and thanks for the monsters for keeping us all flying here. Got a special guest today. I'm excited. And I do want to thank you guys for leaving reviews. We already started getting into it, but we talked a little too much before the show, which always scares me. Because I hate getting into it before the show. Everybody knows this. But I had an awesome time just chatting with him and even getting to know him a little bit, sharing some of the same mutual friends. He's a veteran. He's got a company that I started to get familiar with, but everybody knows I'm a little weak in the long-range thing. But he'll educate me. You don't say former. He's a SEAL. You never say former, right? No. You got the one and only Ryan McMillan. McMillan, right? You say it that way. Yeah. So this is exciting, dude, having you in here. I mean, we could get into all the quintessential SEAL stories, but we're not. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard them all.
I've heard them all. So tell me, start back with the brand and how you got to this place with the brand and what made you want to get in this godforsaken industry for whatever reason and how that happened.
Well, I don't think I really had much of a choice. I mean, I was kind of born into the industry. My grandfather basically invented the fiberglass stock. Gail McMillan, he invented it in he started working on it in the late 60s and basically started McMillan Fiberglass Stocks in 1973. I grew up in that business. I grew up, that was what, my family talked about around the dinner table. So it was just kind of in my blood. After I got out of the military, I went and I worked for the family business for a while. And it's just something that I loved because, the great thing about making stocks, it's like there's so much to do. There's so much you can do with it. You've got the design. You can think of the design. You're working with different materials. We work with carbon fiber. We work with fiberglass. We work with aluminum. The entire process of making a stock is really cool. It's not just like one simple thing we do. We're not like distribution and we receive a product and then ship a product. I mean, we do it from start to finish. So from concept all the way to distribution, branding, marketing, production process. I mean, we do it all. And so that's what's really the challenge to us is, making that happen. And
was your passion long-range shooting?
My passion, yeah, I would say that of anything, my passion would be long-range shooting. Almost by default, though, I didn't grow up shooting long-range. Of course, I shot a little bit with my family and stuff, but I did some sniper stuff in the teams. I did some assault stuff in the team. So I did a little bit of both. So I wasn't like a full-blown sniper. I wasn't like totally on the sniper side in the teams. So when I got out, though, but knowing that my family's history, knowing that's where my grandfather knew some of the original plank owner SEAL Team 6 guys. I mean, that's how close that was.
Fucking crazy.
Part of the reason why I went to the teams is because of that history. So, I just kind of fell into it a little bit, but I love it. It's great. And it fits my personality. There's a difference between an assaulter and a sniper, the different mentalities. The assaulters and breachers, they're really aggressive. They're really extreme type A personalities, which is, the teams need that type of person. Then you got the snipers who are more methodical, and that's kind of how I am.
You're a super chill dude. I get that about you. You seem like you know how to turn it off if it's in there. Yeah. That's a good that's actually a fucking really good thing.
I think there are a group of some of the SEALs are like that. They can turn. Not that they can turn.
I don't think Dom can turn it off.
There's guys like Dom and Chris Kyle, Eddie Penny. They're intense, and those guys really drove the teams. As far as I'm concerned, they drove the teams, and they drove the teams as far. They were in the front of the of the pack driving. But you also need the guys too who are methodical, and they end up being your snipers, and
they just mellow it out.
Yeah, that's kind of where the role that I fit in. I feel like
I love these stories. Now you mentioned your grandfather. excuse me, and this is really important because there's so many guys, and it's not a secret anymore. Ernie Emerson's out there and the training that he's done and what he's participated in through the years. Those stories start to like trickle out and bubble to the surface of some of these guys that have been behind the scenes. There's guys like your grandfather that, you know, developed these brands and developed these products that have been utilized for years and years and years behind the scenes. There's so many of these great stories of guys that not just supported teams or special operations or other things, but they were just involved in the evolution of things and development of things in the R&D. And I find that so fucking cool because back when they were doing it, it was like uncharted territory. Now we have the template and the roadmap for all things, right? Because it's out there because the internet and everything else. But those guys were operating in the dark with like a chisel in a fucking back room, man.
So I have some cool stories about my grandfather. First, the M40A1 that the Marine Corps built was really what they call the birth of the modern sniper rifle. That was really the first rifle in American or probably world history that was dedicated solely for the art of sniping. My grandfather was he contracted him to help them build it. My grandfather spent most of his younger years competition shooting, so he grew up loving shooting and knowing the art of shooting. And back in the 70s or late 60s, early 70s, they didn't know how to make an accurate rifle. So he helped them on that. Then he started working with the plank owners at SEAL Team 6, building specialty guns for them in the early 80s. I mean, he's got some really cool history. He's passed now, but his history is great. And, it wasn't just he started the stock company, invented these fiberglass stocks. No one had seen them before. And then he moved on and started building guns. And he just did some great stuff for the military back in the late 70s and 80s.
It's so freaking wild to me because I just think of those guys. We have all the technology in the world now, and I just think of them in a back room somewhere, or in like a shop. Not even a shop. Let's make the story better. In like a barn, hammering away, and it's just bananas to me, right? Like the ability to see something that we don't have the ability to go on the internet to sketch out. It's just, they're really changing the game and they don't even know it, and they don't even get the respect they deserve today for the things that they did.
Yeah, and partly because you have so much technology now and that advances things. But, back then it was such uncharted territory.
Hammer and chisel.
My grandfather started his business on his dining room table. Imagine epoxy material that literally it turns from goo into this hard material, and your dining room table is literally just caked now with this epoxy.
Yeah, he's like Rocky in the barn. I use that analogy all the time, just figuring it out.
Yeah.
And there's so much time and family time and so much just shit lost. Now you fall into it. You come along. Were you like, I want to run with this? Or were you like, ugh?
Well, so the story goes, I got out of the military and I went to work with my dad at McMillan. He took over the company sometime in the 80s. And, my dad and I just couldn't really figure out how to work together well. So ultimately, I ended up doing my own thing, which turned out to be Grayboe and now Reactor as well. And so that's kind of how that was. I would have been happy to take on that McMillan name, but I had to do it in a different way. I think everybody has their own path, and I was just really eager to do something. My dad was in a different place in his life. He was, kind of, older guy. He had worked his whole life. He just wanted to kind of chill a little bit. And so that wasn't what I wanted. And so I just kind of moved on and started my own thing.
I think that's so noble, and I wasn't going to bring it up unless you were. I think it's so noble to want to forge your own path and do your own thing and make your own mark. And it's crazy to me because we live in such a crazy time right now where everybody's looking for the easy way, and everybody's looking for the cop-out, and everybody's looking for the simple turnkey, like I'll just go work for dad or I'll go do this. You decide to take something on that I think is a big project. I mean, taking on a stocks are tough, and that whole line of business is tough. I mean, I've had the guys on from Gunworks. I've talked to a lot of different people. That long range game is tough. It's hard to make a buck in it. You got to hustle. You got to work hard, because there was this huge influx of people who don't understand the long range world who are listening, and Ryan can better explain it. But the way I saw it from a marketing perspective, we saw SAC come in and everybody was trying to do these big $3,000-$4,000 setups. But then, of course, SIG comes in and they're doing a $1,500, long range gun now, the cat's out of the bag, but they're going to do long action next. But, you know, I think the bottom's fallen out of that market, and it's going to be inexpensive to create a really great long-range rifle. And part of that is innovation, part of that is machining, part of that is creation. And there's always going to be a place for the Gunworkses of the world and the companies like that that are doing real boutique-y stuff. And I think there's a place for it. But it's a tough business, and that's what makes it so interesting to me, because that is a hard nut to crack, the long-range market.
Dude, you totally hit the nail on the head. Like, as technology advances, as machining gets better, as people get better, as we learn, like, gun prices, and I've seen it over my 15 years in the industry, have just fallen. It's getting really hard to sell high-end rifles, because you can build a $1,500 rifle, even a $1,000 rifle, and make it shoot, you know, at least an MOA, maybe even a half MOA. Like it used to be when I first got into the industry, people were guaranteeing one MOA, and it was like, oh my gosh, okay, that's great. Now, if you don't shoot one MOA, you can't even sell a gun. You know what I mean? And it is taking, you know, the whole industry is taking that direction.
And we both know this. So when people start talking about sub MOA and barrels, I'm like, 99% of the barrels out there shoot sub MOA because they're all using the same fucking machines out there to make the barrels, and there's like 4 barrel makers in the whole planet. Yeah. We both know that. Yep. And I try to explain to people, unless you're competing at a high level, you're in the military at a high level, sniper, etc., or you're hunting at a high level, and you're shooting 1,000-yard plus, most of these people that buy this stuff or don't fully understand it, you're going to be fine with most of the barrels that are out there in the universe. Mm-hmm. And they totally overthink it. They think they got to go out and buy, you know, $1,000 proof. Not that proof's a bad, it's a great product. But, you know, for the most part, you can get something really good at the right price point, and that's the nature of where the market's going. And SIG, being a leader in the industry, is always going to set the tone. Does that mean they're the best? Not necessarily. I'm a big SIG fan, but at the same time, you know, it's a $1,500 bolt gun. It's going to be a great bolt gun. They're going to do a good job getting people in. There's always going to be a place for the Gunworkses of the world, the Grayboes of the world, and certain folks that are going to try to come in. I think it's going to be a lot harder for some of the bigger conglomerates like the Saks and everything else to jump in and try to be an in-between what you guys are and what SIG is. That's where they're going to struggle.
They're in no man's land.
They're in no man's land.
It's really tough. And, you know, the companies like Gunworks, you're spot on with Gunworks. Those companies will always, well, when I say always, as long as they continue on the path that they're going, they'll have business. Because in our industry, and especially, I think, in long range, brand matters a lot. So Gunworks has created a great brand, right? So, you know, you may buy a $10,000 package, including a scope from them. Maybe something similar you could get, you know, for $3,000 or $4,000 with the scope. You know, having your gunsmith build it. The shooter's probably never going to know the difference.
Right.
But when he holds that, you know, Gunworks gun, he's got that good feeling about it.
His dick grows 3 inches. You know,
and then you've got the Gunworks, you know, customer service or whatever they do to make that customer feel like a part of their team. That's what Gunworks does well.
Yeah, some companies are a marketing company that sells guns. Some people are a gun company that tries to market. Gunworks is a customer service company that sells guns. Their experience is amazing.
They did something that, you know, in the market that I haven't seen since is, you know, being able to sell a $5,000 or $6,000 rifle and do a lot of them, do super huge volumes. And they did a great job. I mean, one of the few companies I've ever seen, or if only company I've ever seen, really be able to do that. Most of the other companies that build $5,000 or $6,000 rifles, they may sell 200, 500, maybe 1,000 a year. But these guys are selling lots of guns.
Lots of guns. Yeah, they do a great job. They just moved into a new giant warehouse. I know they had that little bankruptcy issue, but I think it was just a matter of paperwork at that point and figuring out who they were going to bank with. I think there was a little bit of a logistical thing there. I can't imagine, knowing the ownership there, and they've been on the show, that there was more to that. But I think the long range game is a fun one, and we've seen it try, Ryan, multiple times to catch on, for lack of better words, like whether it's people who instruct, whether it's people who participate in a sport. You know, we've seen so many different competition level things come in. Why do you think it struggles so hard to catch on and to gain traction in that space? And is it just systemic of all shooting competitions or competition sports and shooting? Is it the cost? Is it an elitist thing? Where do you see it fitting?
I think a couple. I mean, first of all, the cost is definitely a barrier. If you want to shoot well, you're going to have to spend some money, you know, like we just talked about, $1,500 rifle. And then you're going to have to spend $1,000 maybe ish on a scope.
Two.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. You can probably get a Vortex for $1,000 and do well in the beginning, but you know, as you progress and you want to get better, you're going to have to get better equipment. It's an expensive thing. So that's the other reason. But you know, it's work too. I mean, a lot of people just want to go out and plank steel. Mm-hmm. This is not necessarily that. This is really like an art. Like, you've got to be into it. Like, people who get into it really get into it. That's why I think our part of the industry, the long range part of the industry, is so unique. We don't ebb and flow with the market like the defense weapons. We're not a defense weapon. We didn't see this huge ramp up like the whole other parts of the industry saw. We didn't see that in our little part of the industry, because we're not a defense weapon. We're also the people in our industry. I just think that they're more into it because they have to be. They're spending more money. It's more of an art form. The art of sniping or marksmanship is not just going out and plinking and coming. Like, you got to know your dope. You got to know how to use the scope. You got to know your kit. There's a lot to it.
I call it the hockey of shooting sports. Like, it's so expensive, and you do have to start at such a novice level. It's not like if you're a good athlete, you can get out there and probably shoot a handgun competition. You could do okay. You'll fling a bunch of rounds, but you can be quick to the spots and you can figure shit out. But the long range game requires an intellectual component far beyond in so many ways, because of the amount of things you have to process if you want to eventually get to the level of being able to compete, being able to go on a long range hunt, being able to head on some of those backcountry hunts. I mean, you have to have because you only get one chance a lot of times. So when you build these rifles, it's important to understand what you're building them for. And we talk about glass and building one. Can you get in the game for 3? Yeah. Are you looking more at like 6 just to kind of really feel good about yourself? Yeah. And then it goes from there. Phone numbers. I mean, you can spend 10 and still be a ways away, depending on the glass. I mean, between a Schmidt and Bender and a good long-range rifle, you can be in the hole about $7,000 real fast. And when I explain that to people, and then not even going to get into ammo and the loads and everything else, because that's a whole fight over what caliber makes the most sense and how that works. When you get a customer, I'm always curious about the customer experience. When you get someone who comes to you with your experience and they say, Ryan, and I'm sure you get this 50 times at the dinner table when friends come in, I want to build one. What do I do? Where do you even start?
I don't know. I get that. I actually get that question all the time. And even though we just make stocks and accessories and we don't build guns, I still get that question, because of my name and my past. I honestly, I don't even answer that question well. I mean, there's so many different calibers. It's so specific to the user. I'd have to spend, 30 minutes, an hour with someone just talking about what they're using it for. Do you want to hunt? Are you looking at shooting PRS? Do you want to just shoot off a bench? Are you looking at, extreme long range, short range? What's your goal? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of questions to ask. I mean, and there's some pretty popular calibers now, like 6.5 Creedmoor, and there's some other 6.5 variants coming out, and all kinds of really cool stuff you can get into. If you geek out about it, you can get in all these wildcat calibers. There's endless like rabbit holes you can get in. It's almost impossible. Like the individual really needs to do his own research, and part of that research is maybe asking me a little bit about what I think, but it's really the individual needs to really understand what he wants or she wants out of it, and then just start kind of plugging away.
I get a sense you're like me. You're like, listen, I'll give you one. Go out and shoot for a little bit. Yeah. Then come back to me. Do a little research. Go watch a YouTube video. Dial in your thoughts a little bit on what you're looking at, and then we can have a conversation at least on a +1 level.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I am.
Yeah, and, you try to have as much patience as you can, but a lot of people, when they don't know, like they don't even know the right questions to ask yet, and it's hard for me to even give them any good information because, it takes a lot of dialogue to even get to the, what is important.
The root.
Yeah, the root of it.
Yeah, it's a tough one like that. We get these questions all the time. I'm not an instructor. I never pretend to be. Everybody who knows me knows I have zero patience for that shit. I just don't have that mechanism to teach. There's far better teachers out there that I suggest people go to. There's far better lessons to learn. Can I show someone a couple things? Sure. Have I put a lot of rounds downrange? Sure. Does that mean I know shit from Shinola, anything on the level you do, or a certain guy? No, that's why I go to guys like you. I'm not that guy. But you get these questions all the time, whether it be in the DM, at the dinner table. And it's important to have a path as a company to see these people from A to B, especially the people that want to become customers. And that's the thing you always struggle with, is having the patience to say, well, you know, if you're thinking of getting into this, this would be something I would suggest. Start with, you know, you almost have a cut and paste answer. But there's nothing like, in my opinion, just saying to someone, hey, grab a gun off the wall, you know, borrow one of mine, go out a couple times, go to the range, I'll set you up. Here's a handful of ammo. Go shoot a little bit. Go watch a couple YouTube videos, some YouTube experts out there. Go hear a few things. Then let's grab dinner in a week or two. We can talk about it. Then it's able to ratchet up at least to a 1. Yeah. And you can have that conversation like, geez, you know, I really liked the way that 6.5 shot. You know, it was perfect, 800 to 1,200 yards. I felt like I was really dialed in. I enjoyed that gun. You know, well, what'd you like about it? What do you know, where do you see yourself going? And then it's the ranges. It's finding access to these places to go and shoot these things, because there's not a lot of access. Most ranges are 100 yards or they're bays. It's finding places, and you got to go to like a Montana, a Colorado, a Wyoming to find some of these ranges that you can really stretch it out. You know, the longest range I shot at was down at Altair, down in Florida years ago. We go out to Okeechobee. And we could at least poke out 1,500, 1,700 yards, which is a nice poke. You know, it's fun to get out there and do that. To say I have the ability or the skill to do that with any degree of regularity is laughable. And that truly shows you the skill that it takes to do that, where the breathing comes in, the response, the trigger discipline, even the ability to sit out there for hours in the fucking heat. And that's what people discount, especially when it comes to hunting, you know, getting out there and being able to schlep, you know, 10, 15, 20 miles and dial it in at the right time when you know, are going after some game. It's a fun, to everybody listening, it's a fun fucking thing to get into. It really can be. And I dig what you guys are doing. I dig the stocks. I dig the angle. I love the brands, you know, the Grayboe thing, everything, you know, that you guys are doing. And it's just going to be a matter of time in this long-range game to see who dials it in and, you know, who the survivors are and who are the thrivers. Because I think a lot of people jumped in willy-nilly, especially around the time we were talking about 2-3 years ago, the SAC era, you know, when everybody was trying to throw $3,000 long-range guns on their wall and trying to sell $1,000 stocks. You know, I think your stuff's smartly priced. I like your SKU line, and I like what you're doing. And I think it says a lot about you guys and where you are and where you're trying to go.
Well, just, you know, we talked about, you know, the overall rifles coming down. I mean, the performance is staying high and the cost is coming down. You know, I felt like stocks should be the same, right? You know, companies like SIG and Bergera and all the big companies, they're able to produce high caliber rifles with for a really good cost, where before, you know, like the SACs were trying to sell a $4,000 rifle. It became tough. They were in no man's land. So I wanted to do the same thing with Grayboe. I felt like we could make stocks more efficient than the people were at the point in time. And so, you know, we priced ours to a point where I thought, like, let's bring the cost down. Let's get more people engaged, and but still produce the best stock we can. And
at the end of the day, regardless of the SIGs, and I love everybody there, guys who get into this and gals who get into this, they're going to want to build it eventually. That's the truth. I mean, you know that, and I know that. I mean, who shoots a stock Glock at this point? Who doesn't change the trigger?
The brand new person to the market. You know
day one. Yeah. So you might go out and buy a SIG Cross, right? Okay, out of the box, great. Throw a $2,000 scope on it, I'm ready to party. But as you get into it, and this is anything, doesn't matter if it's shooting, you're going to want to customize and build your own thing. And that's where I think you'll be a logical stop, because you get into a really badass stock at, say, $600. You get a kick-ass action at $600, $700, $800 if you can find a fucking action, right? You get an action, you're into it for $1,600, barrel it out. Maybe you drop in, like you said, you know, a Remington, whatever you want to do. But you're able to get into it smartly, build it how you want, and now you have something you're like, I built this.
Yeah. And, you know, oftentimes you can build something like that with a gunsmith, and you can buy your own parts and pieces, and you can actually save quite a bit of money than going to one of these other companies. And the companies, you know, they got to pay for their overhead. You know, when you're dealing with a gunsmith, all you're dealing with is this little shop, and he's putting it together for you. They don't have the overhead. They don't need to make those margins, as much margins as, the bigger companies do. So you end up saving some money when you start building your own gun, if you do it smartly.
And to everybody listening, go to a gunsmith. I think I think we could spend a whole podcast on the stay-at-home guy. Don't, unless you have, don't do it. Just don't do it. Yeah. Get a gun. Anytime you get into a project like this, I always like to put a disclaimer. Guys, go get a gunsmith. Find someone who knows what they're doing to help put this together for you. There's a lot of great ones out there. There's a lot of people that can help you. Don't try to be slick at home with a vice.
Yeah. And even all gunsmiths aren't created equal either. Do your research on the gunsmiths, because there's some hacks out there. So make sure you get some recommendations and before you buy all these parts.
And find out what they specialize in.
Yeah.
Certain guys specialize in 1911. Certain guys specialize in long range. Now, diving into some of the juicy stuff, where do you see this going? I mean, is this a company you want to develop and expand and grow into something? What do you want to see it be in 5 years or in 10?
Well, what I can say for right now is that I want to keep making the best stocks I can and accessories. So our goal is to make stocks and accessories that attach to the stock itself. And so my goal is to keep getting better and better and better at doing that. And my goal is to use the most efficient material. So most stock makers out there, they either specialize in some composite or they're kind of aluminum chassis. Mm-hmm. So we just launched our first chassis, which means that we do both chassis and we do composites. And so I want to start to build both of those lines so that and there's ways to combine these materials to make the best product. And so in the next 5 or 10 years, my goal is to be the #1 stock manufacturer on the planet.
Do you believe that are the days of the $1,000 stock dead? Because I asked the SIG guys, and everybody who worked on it, they said, we think it is. Now, you're under that for your SKU line. Your SKU line's completely under that. I have a theory. I just think the days of the $1,000 aluminum I just think that's a thing of the past.
I can say that the aluminum chassis over the last couple of years have definitely been less, have sold less from what I hear from my distribution channels. $1,000 stock, is it dead? Gosh, I don't know. That's a good question.
It's the $1 million question in your market.
I can't answer it for you.
Because people were trying to do it, and I think that's why, we saw, was it Lisa sold J. Allen? I think, we saw some companies come out because you just, once you hit that $8.99, right, it's like that $9.99. It's a hard fucking market.
Yep, and you gotta, if you're gonna sell $1,000 stock, it better be
better than yours.
Fucking best.
It better be better than yours, right?
I mean, that's the only way that I think that survives is if it's by far and away, the best product out there, and you can get some traction with your branding.
I feel like that's been, I guess, the $100,000 question in the long-range industry right now is who's going to win? Is it composites? Is it aluminum? And where does the SKU... Because people obsess over this, right? There's think tanks that obsess over this shit. Like, where does the SKU ceiling reach, the cost? And where's the floor? And where do we fit? Because, like you said, SAC fell into no man's land. It was just an in-between product. So I always obsess over this stuff because the marketer in me would come back and say, I can't market that.
The composites are going to win. I mean, I can tell you that. And the reason is there's so much more flexibility. You can do them cheaper. They're getting better. You need a good formulator. It's like baking a cake. Mm-hmm. But as far as aluminum is aluminum. All you can do with aluminum is just cut it differently, design differently. But with composites, you can always make things better. They're always getting better. Lighter, stronger, cheaper. I mean, that's the progression of composites. Aluminum is what it is, man.
And I just think of you guys, and you're all so anal. If an aluminum piece is cut wrong for 1 second, you're going to know.
Yeah.
If it's a bad run or whatever, you can't get away with a bad run.
And, as an owner and even someone who does, you see everything. And
what goes out the door.
Some of my employees, too, are like, don't show Ryan this because he's going to pick out every little minute
every
detail.
Nuance.
He is not happy with anything. And, that's kind of part of being the owner. And sometimes I have to just step back a little bit, let my employees do their thing. But, yeah, I see, see everything. When a stock comes out of the mold or comes off the machine, it's hard to miss anything.
I always want to ask guys like you behind the curtain, how much R&D goes into something before you put it up and you want to sell it? How deep are you going?
You mean actually testing it?
Testing it, you know, because I get a kick out of the T&E guys. You know what I'm saying? Right? Hey, send me that. Let me try it. And I like to put information out there to tell these guys this shit goes through a lot of testing.
Well, what I would say is the material itself is what needs to be tested the most, right? So especially if you're making composites. So the material, once you have the material, you know you can make stocks in any form. I guess, how do you say that? Stocks in any form. And then so the first stocks are the ones that you got to test the most, right? Your first iterations, because you want to make sure they're strong. You want to make sure they're light. They're going to, be the stocks that the people want. But once you start making more, you don't have to test as much because it's the material that's already been tested. You have a proven recipe, and that recipe goes through a process and gets made. And so the actual testing itself on later stocks, later iterations of the same material don't need to be tested as much, but you still do. The geometry changes on every product. You launch a new product, the geometry is different. You got to make sure the geometry itself doesn't cause weak areas. So yeah, we do a decent amount of testing, but as we do more and more of the same thing or made out of the same material, it's not as intense as it was in the beginning. Because
you're dialing in the same recipe, you're just making those tweaks.
Yep.
Yeah, it's something that I think, people don't fully understand on the outside because, you get 100 emails about this. Let me try it. Let me T&E it. Let me do this. And you try to explain to people with a disclaimer, with respect, depending on who it is. Like, listen, Mr. Instagram shooter, we're going to go there. Listen, Mr. Instagram shooter, we test this very rigorously. This goes through X amount of process. Because everybody's sniffing around for one of the biggest problems in the firearms business, which is the free stuff. How do I get my hands on it? And I think it's a systemic problem, and that's why the T&E words become a dirty word. So I always try to put out there the amount of testing, the amount of work that goes into manufacturing this, that it's not done willy-nilly and just thrown on a website, and hey, we're going to run with this. They have to understand and respect where you come from, the knowledge, the discipline, the ability, like you said, to come up with that recipe, the formula, and that there's science behind it. And that's what people don't fully understand. It's not to say you're against someone trying the product to see if it fits their usage or whatever it is, but it's explaining to them that, listen, we've tested this pretty extensively. This is where this fits, and this is where this makes sense. Yes, you can't fit a square peg into a round hole. You can't take one of our stocks, light it on fire, throw it in a river, do whatever. There's always going to be a breaking point in every product and in everything that's designed, and there's always going to be pluses and minuses to the product that you choose, and however you choose it, depending on where you're going to go and what you're going to do with it. But it's all mission-driven and mission-specific. Yeah. And that sometimes is the hard thing, because if you're just going to go to a range and plink, there's a lot of good stocks out there to buy. If you're going to go on a backcountry hunt, you may want to consider something a little more durable, a little stronger, that's been through, some more rigorous testing. But it's explaining that to the end user and getting them to understand we can't make the $399 one, the $899 one, the $699 one. And sometimes, those are conversations we have all the time because people want to compare Glock to this or to that or whatever company out there. And we try to find that safe space where they all fit. And where you guys fit, I think, is probably one of the best. Take it home, build what you want, create what you want respectfully. And don't, maybe you have 2 of these, maybe you have 3 of these, and that's where the customer becomes a client. Yeah. And they use only your stocks. Yeah. And that's always the end goal, right? Yeah. As a brand.
And as a new company, this is what we see. We see a lot of repeat customers, which is good, right?
Key.
So I was just talking to my sales team earlier this week, and they're like, we're seeing a lot of I have 3 of your stocks, I have 4 of your stocks. So they're coming back. So that's good. But also in our 4th year of being in business, we're still getting that new customer, which is also good. You want the new customer. You want the guys who have tried your stocks and want to come back because they love your brand, they love your product, and then you still want to be able to capture that new customer too. So yeah, both of those. So
we're gonna jump into the marketing stuff, and this is one thing I threw at a company, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. I said, "Do you guys do any initiatives where?" you have someone that's bought 2 or 3 of your products. Do you ever take it upon yourself to maybe reach out to them, send them a personal email, send them a card, maybe say, hey, here's 10% off, give it to a friend. We want to support you. This industry's so bad at nurturing those relationships, Ryan. Think if you went to a bank and you gave a bank $1 million, right? which I know it's not $1 million, but somebody goes and buys 3 of your stocks. Let's walk through this journey, this customer experience with me. They buy 3 of your stocks. They spend some decent money, $1,500, $2,000. The whole rifle all in, they're probably spending $3,000 a rifle. There's no ownership in this industry of anyone stepping up and saying, the company I said this to was a scope company. And I said, so somebody buys $10,000 worth of your stuff. You don't have a database of that? You're not sending them like a discount code, like anything? You're just willing to let them like float out there into the dust? And you're in that specialized market where they would probably love to hear from you guys or love to have some engagement, you know? And I put it back on the sales team. Like, we need to create a program for these 2 or 3 or 4 time buyers to keep them engaged.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, we, again, the same meeting that I spoke with my sales team this week, we talked about the same thing. Now, for us, you know, just to be flat out honest, when we started the company, we knew that our company was really designed and would succeed on our process and our production. So we focused 100% of our money and efforts on making sure that we could make a good product. And in some ways, some degrees, we outsourced we had distribution for our sales. And we hired a good company to do that. They've been great for us. But one of the things that we're trying to get back to now that we've got our process down and everything's going well is exactly what you're saying. How do we engage better with that customer? Because that's what matters at the end of the day. These customers want to feel like, you know, they bought a product.
A part of the family.
They want to, like I said, it's in this industry, it's branding. You got it. That brand says a lot about it.
Because you're in that specialized niche where that's critical.
Yep.
You know what I mean? The product and the customer service, to me, become the 2 most important things. Yeah, you want to build a kick-ass brand, and you'd love to be able to throw $250,000 at branding and being huge. But at the end of the day, like, I've worked for lube companies and everything. It's like sometimes it's a lube, you know. We're only going to get in so many people's faces, because how many times do you buy gun lube a year? Twice. You know, we used to go through this battle at Breakthrough. You know, it's hard. What you're fighting for more than it's important to know what you're fighting for. What you're fighting for more than anything is shelf space in that space. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to win shelf space. In your space, what you're fighting for is someone to not come in and buy 1 stock. You want them to build 5 rifles, 6 rifles. And it's getting them to where, like, there's trigger points. Like, they buy their 3rd stock, it triggers, you know, 10% off your next one or whatever. Something that makes them feel warm and fuzzy. Or a call. It initiates a call from your team direct, you know, hey, you know, we noticed, you know, you've bought in 3 of our products the last 3 years. We just want to extend a 10% off to you. You can use it whenever you want. You know, you're our gold elite customer. Like, that's like simple programs that I think in our industry, you know, people don't spend enough time obsessing over that part of the experience. And I think it becomes almost like if we build it, they'll come, you know, and that's kind of the old way of doing it. And it's what stymied a lot of brands, I feel. And we see it out there, and even the Remington. I love John Trull in the Remingtons and the certain brands. It's stymied a lot of them because they make such awesome stuff. Like the Marlin line is an awesome line, but there's got to be a process for these things. Like, you have to hold the person's hand. Like, if I go to the Smith & Wesson custom shop, I want to feel like my hand is being held through that process. And I think that a lot of that gets lost, especially now, because it's just such a fire drill because everybody's buying everything, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to go back. We owe it to our customer, to ourselves, to go back and kind of dial that process in as tight as we can. It's not easy. It's always a work in progress, but you're buried in that niche where you have to be on that.
Yep. That separates, I think, the best product or best companies from the mediocre companies is your customer service. Mm. So, you know, there's a lot of good stock makers out there. Believe me, I think there's good competition in my space. So you've got to find the little things that matter, the little things that get that customer coming back to you and not going to the competitor, because they're going to get a good stock from somebody else, guaranteed. There's good companies out there.
Do you want to expand into barrels and actions?
No. And I say that because I've done that before. I really don't want to get into any of the serialized parts. So the action is the serialized part. I really don't want to be under the radar of the ATF.
What's killing the action? I want to ask you, what's killing the action space? Because they can't make them fast enough. Is it the tooling? Is it just that it's
a very complex part. I can tell you that. Now, I don't know all the innards of, you know, the action.
Because Defiance can't make them fast enough.
Well, and then you get a brand like Defiance, and they're just killing it, you know, and then people just want their stuff. But action making is complex. I can tell you that right now. There's
5-axis or so. You need a 5-axis.
And you need like at least the way we did it in the past. You have a gun drill, which is a super specialized drill that only few companies have. I mean, wire EDMs, all kinds of different stuff. And you got the bolt. You got to weld the bolt on. If certain people do it certain ways, but there's a lot of process that goes into making an entire action. It is complex work.
Yeah, it's that space I feel can never meet the demand. And in my time in the business, in 10 years, I don't think I've seen one company success. I mean, Defiance kills it. They murder it. I mean, let's be disclaimer. Yeah. But I'm yet to see a company really meet the demand for, Google search and action right now, it's sold out. Yeah. And that's going to be a problem. Coming up now, we saw that run because of COVID, and this gets into a deeper business conversation. We saw the COVID run. I talk to a lot of companies, as you do too. A lot of companies are scared right now that they're not going to be able to meet the election demand, whether it goes either way, Ryan. And they feel, do we ramp up production? Do we try? And you can't hire people because people are home collecting more money than they'd be making working. Mm-hmm. So I know companies that are literally paying people cash under the table to come in just to meet the demand because they cannot make the product fast enough. How do we fix this?
Well, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. And we don't see, in my business in particular, and I can't speak for every business in the long range game, but we don't see these huge ebbs and flows of when big defense weapons are being bought, like when COVID happened and when the riots happened, huge gun sales. But we didn't see a lot of it. We saw some weirdness. There's definitely some weirdness.
More pokes and bumps.
Yeah, like we had some customers who were just slow. Because I think, and then some customers who are busy, I think it has to do with price point. Number one, like new buyers coming into the market, if they're going to buy a bolt gun, they're going to buy it the cheapest one, pretty much right off the bat. It takes some, and they're hunting, by the way. They're not long range shooters. They're hunters. This is what I'm talking about. So, that's that. We just don't see that ebb and flow, but we have seen some weirdness. Now, as far as like the action makers and stuff like that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I'm not sure how they go about hiring more people. I know Defiance is in Montana. I don't know.
Drove by it every day when I lived up there.
I don't know how what the workforce looks like up there. I'm in Phoenix. We have, at some points in the year, 6,000 people in the metropolitan area. Like I got a big workforce to choose from. When you're in Montana, I can't imagine that you've got a great workforce to choose from. So that's a problem. And a lot of these companies are the same way. They're in these small towns. They start up as small, new, startups, and they build just like Defiance. And now they've got a big facility, but they need the resources.
Yeah, and I know Michael pumps a ton of money into that company. It's interesting. This is going to be a very interesting time in how this plays out, particularly for the firearms business in general. And I think and I ask you this. With all these new gun owners coming in, which you brought up, you have a lot of people who already own guns who went out and bought a lot more. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of people coming in now. Obviously, first pistol, whatever. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. Huge influx. We've noticed Smith & Wesson has put in a new program where they're starting to tout, new to shooting, blah, 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 which I think is great. And Julie Galoub's run it. Julie's going to do a fabulous job with it. I think it's a step in the right direction. But do you think at some point we'll kind of see the end? And I ask you this as a SEAL, and we talked about this offline. Do you think we're getting closer to the end of this elitist culture inside of the gun culture that says you got to be a ninja or you got to be this? Because I've had these battles, as you know, with people. You got to be X, Y, and Z, or you're not legit enough to be a gun owner, or you got to be something. Everybody, we're obsessed with it, and we catch ourselves doing it. And we talked about this offline. As an owner, you're not turning somebody's money away because they're not legit enough or they're not this enough. What is the obsession with that in this industry, and does that die with this?
Well, this question is a narrow question, but there's a broader question in the industry itself. And I think there's individuals who I think it's just individual personalities sometimes who they have a hard time. I don't know exactly how to put it, but these new gun owners maybe are kind of a threat in some way. I don't know how it is exactly. I know you talked about it in your podcast at one point, in another podcast too, and I totally agreed with you. Like I think that it's
childish.
there's certain people, you and I, maybe others, who need to kind of step up and start speaking out more about, like, these new gun owners. This is a good thing. This is not a bad thing. We need to let these people in and teach them, and like with open
cultivate
arms.
them.
Like, this is great. This is exactly what we want. Don't tell them that they're not good enough because you can't shoot as well as me or whatever, or make them feel bad because they're new. I mean, that's the worst thing that we can do. We've got to welcome them in. And I've had this conversation with other people. I'm like, I hope those new first-time gun owners, I hope that there's a big percentage of those who become real shooters, who become part of the industry, who 2A becomes kind of their DNA. They get sucked into that gun culture because the culture is great. We are, the gun culture in some ways is its own worst enemy, but we need to fix that. I think there's enough people out here talking in the right direction, like what we're saying right here, to fix that. It's just we need to keep talking about it.
It needs to. You and I both know. I'm going to say it needs to change, yep. And the reason mainly it needs to change is we need the money, we need the customer base, and there's no better time than now, given who we have in office, to take this mainstream, to take this to another level. We've seen more gun owners come in the last, what are we in, month 8 months, than we've seen in the entire of last year. We know that baked into that is a large women's contingent, black or brown contingent, and we hope that those market segments eventually lead to people that want to hunt, because obviously self-sufficiency is a big thing right now, post-COVID. And what I don't understand, and I've never understood about the gun industry, and I've put this question on multiple gun industry owners, CEOs, executives. I'm like, some of you people talk as if you're going to turn the money away. I get endless amounts of UFC fighters in here, people in here, all defense industry people interested in being more capable, interested in their own defense. They love shooting. They're just not out of the closet completely about shooting, okay? Yeah, they're not pounding the Second Amendment, but this is the only industry, the only one, where we have this obsession with being you have to be almost accepted at another level. And it's really sad because you don't do that with the First Amendment. Everybody can say whatever they want. We have these social media platforms. Everybody says what they want. There's no repercussion for it. You say whatever you want. It's almost too bad. It's the other way. It's another story. But in our industry, it's almost like, whoa, did you see? They shouldn't even have a gun. Did you see where they put their finger? Whoa, did you see how they held it? Oh, they're not, he was just Army. He's not Special Forces. He was only an ensign in the Navy. He's not a SEAL. Like, no other industry, Ryan, does that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is, but there are people out there like that. And I think the only thing that we can do, people who recognize that and say that needs to change, we need to just speak up about it. When we see it, we need to say something. The most important thing to me is like more 2A supporters. I mean, the riots have, I think it's going to be really hard for gun grabbers to overcome all of the individuals who felt like they really needed to buy a gun. I think it's going to be hard for gun grabbers to, at least in the near future, because people forget, right? Americans will forget at some point, but it's too close. It's too close to us. There's too many people who went out and bought weapons to defend themselves and are going, you know what? My thoughts about the Second Amendment before, maybe I should change it. Maybe I do understand now how important it is to be able to
participate.
A gun. And not just that. Here's the thing. It's the ARs too. The ARs are always on the chopping block, right? But guess what? When when Antifa says that they're coming to the suburbs and Antifa's running packs, what gun are you going to choose to protect your family? It's not going to be a pistol, I can tell you that. When I looked at my guns, the one I took out to make sure that I knew that I could protect my family was my AR-15.
Of course.
Right? Because
Makes
who
sense
knows
to me.
how many people are going to be coming up. And,
you don't know.
You don't know. And as good of a shooter as I might be, my pistol may not be enough.
It's just it's a good topic to talk about, and I'm glad I got your thoughts on it, because it's terrifying to me at this particular time as we see these new gun owners come in, as we see these new potential customers come in. Because what I try to explain to not just the listenership, but even the gun owners out there, listen, you cannot have that attitude. Even if you want to have that attitude, you cannot have that attitude. And there's 1,000 reasons as to why. but you're not helping the industry. You're not helping the customer base. You're not helping the industry progress forward. And you cannot have a mindset of elitism and I fit in because, and you don't because. If you approached running a jiu-jitsu mat like that, you'd never get another person to sign up. You'd never get another person to sign up because everybody starts as a white belt. Let them start as a white belt. Let them learn. Let them lean on good people for advice because there's nothing better to you as a business owner than someone who has a fistful of cash and is willing to learn.
Right.
And that's what I try to explain to not just influencers, people with platforms, people who are out there speaking. Allow them, give them the grace to figure it out. Instead of putting that little comment underneath of you don't know how to hold a gun, you're dog shit, go fucking jump out a window, send them a nice message. Hey, you know, if you want to do a free lesson, I'm over here.
I do think, though, that those people that you're talking about who leave those comments, they're becoming in our industry. I think it's turning. I think people are starting to call them out. I think we need to keep doing it more. But I do think that my hope is that it turns completely and that we welcome these new gun owners in and hopefully not just welcome them in, but like, yeah, you bought your first gun, but like step into our culture. Like the 2A culture is super unique, probably the most unique subculture in the entire United States. Because of what we have to go through, because of the rights that we have to defend. We're constantly like in a foxhole defending our freedoms. And it's like, all we're trying to do is defend our right to be free, really is what it comes down to, right? That's what we think we're doing, defending our right to be free. And we feel like that's constantly being infringed.
The industry's come a long way. It has. I will say this. It's come a long way in the sense that I remember even when fitness came in and everything else, and I asked this because you were the elite of the elite. Whether it's fitness, conditioning, training, whatever the training is, mixed martial arts, all the different things, those are all what I call like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Those are all people that are going to be huge supporters of the things that we're trying to do. And one of the things we talked about offline was through this podcast is having a lot of those people step up in front of the gun wall, have a conversation, talk about what's important to them. And the same theme keeps coming up. They just want to be more capable people. They just want to be able to defend their family, take care of themselves. Those are all very clear inherent qualities that exist not just in the fitness community, exists in the MMA community, exists in a lot of the communities that I bring on to the show or I try to have on the show. And you're the elite of the elite. You represent that elite group. And it's important when you guys speak up too. So I put some of the onus back on you guys to speak up and say, we want all these people in our business. We want them walking around the shows. We want them participating. I think the underbelly or the undercurrent of the industry is if they all come in, they're going to take something that's mine.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. And if people think like that, they're wrong. All that's going to do is gain more support for the gun industry in general and gain more support for the Second Amendment. And those are the two most important things in our industry, making sure that we keep our rights and making sure that we can continue to exercise those rights by buying guns. Oh,
people said to me once, they said, well, what do you want to see at SHOT Show? And I said, I want to see like a fucking powerlifting competition. I want to see Monster Energy booths. I'm like, I want it all there.
That's cool.
Because that's going to be the homogenous environment that's going to take us to the next level. I want drone companies there. I want people who like Dungeons and Dragons. I want gamers. I want everything. All of it.
That would be cool. That's a good idea. It's a great idea. Because then you start melding different people. I mean, people who don't even know anything about guns are taught from a young age, let's say, that guns are bad, never held a gun, never talked to a gun person.
The issue we run into, Ryan, with that, and I've talked to the NSSF about it, is you got 100-year-old people running. I love Larry, but the marketing department, they need to go after fresh meat. Mm-hmm. When you go up to those like learning experiences or those things they do upstairs, they're still trying to talk about running Facebook ads, and they don't even realize we can't run Facebook ads. You know what I'm saying? They're not understanding where we are and where it can go. And when you start to piece that together, like you look at events like the Arnold Classic in Ohio. Arnold does a great job, not just incorporating bodybuilding, but he has the judo championships there. He's got mixed martial arts there. He's got powerlifting meets there. He's got a little bit of everything for everybody. And what are the subcultures that affect our industry? Gamers, fitness, training. any kind of training, blade, combatives, all these different things. But what the NSSF does is they look at the landscape and they say, here's a pouch manufacturer, we'll give them a booth. I'd be going to like Monster Energy or one of these brands and I'd be like, we'll give you a booth. We just want you there. I'd be going around to some of these companies and say, we want you a part of our culture.
Well, there's something, I think, and I've thought a lot about this. I don't know how it's going to play out, but you know, I spent a lot of time looking, doing some research on Red Bull and Monster and how they've created their brand. Because if you look at Red Bull,
we could spend an hour on that.
Red Bull, I mean, like the last thing on their website is selling drinks, right? They don't,
that's
not who they are anymore.
You watch the channel, you never see a can.
No, it's all about extreme sports. So they've basically taken over this extreme sports space, and they're like they're the name in extreme sports. But I think there's something there in the firearms industry too, because the firearms industry is exciting in a similar way. The
problem is I'm going to tell you the problem. The firearms industry is run and managed by owners that are also engineers. So when they produce their baby, which is the stock or whatever it is, their baby, that's their baby, the AR, they want to make it all about that. How many times have you walked by a booth and they're like, you got to grab this rail. It's 0.1 lighter than the other one. You have to grab it. It has a new locking system. It's K-Lock or whatever the fuck they come up with next. And we're so burnt out from that. And I agree. I had Jessica Govin on the show, real smart lady. She said, most of these companies should be creating more of an experience. Put your newest 1 or 2 products out there, but have the ability to take a customer through an experience of that product and what it took you to design it, instead of putting 50 guns on a wall, having people, it's the same old experience, and it's old and it's dated and it's tired. And if it was me running SHOT Show, I would reduce down the size of the spaces that we're given, because everybody who makes a pouch doesn't need a booth at SHOT Show. It's like trading time for money. We're trading booth space for money. That's all the NSS is. We're trading booth space for money. And that formula is never going to be a great formula, because you've seen it. What percentage of booths shouldn't even be there? 20? 30?
A lot, probably.
A lot.
Yeah.
Right? You've been around. You're a gear, you know what? You like gear like everybody else. Yep. You know, I love seeing gear. And I love walking around and taking it all in. But everybody doesn't need a booth there just because they paid for it. So boil all the fat down, make it, simplify it, dial in what it is we're looking at, and make the experience better. Yeah. And I get that the restrictions, and you know, I want to put this out. I get that there's restrictions on being able to have drinks there or food there or this or that because of the venues and things like that. But there are ways to incorporate some of these new audiences and to engage these new audiences and these people. They would not be putting people like Tony Sentman out at Real World Tactical on Call of Duty, people like Alex Zedra, other people that have been on there, too, from Ronin Tactics, other guys. They put these people in these video games. We're bleeding into that genre, but we're doing nothing to take that genre in.
And it's a tough one, too, because I was a part of a game 2012 or 13 called Medal of Honor. And we had, luckily, the guys who were running Medal of Honor were actually, you know, they worked for EA Sports, but they happened to be 2A positive. So what the guy was doing, he was trying to meld, like really create more of a good experience with the firearms, with the gamers. And he got hammered. And EA got hammered for it. And because all it took was one person to complain. And next thing you know, EA's on the chopping block. And he got hammered for it, and then the whole thing. I think that's a big hurdle of just our American culture. You know, the left, honestly, and they're so anti-gun that they can't even appear anywhere. Like we can't, you know, like you said, we can't advertise on Facebook or Instagram. We're totally shut out from Google. We're totally shut out from YouTube. You know, it's like there's such an adversarial relationship there, and I think that's a big hurdle.
But it's our a hurdle, but it's also our biggest failure, because there are other avenues. You know this. We've talked about it offline. There's other places we can go. We're fixated with the wrong things so often. Like, think about it this way. Before I started this podcast, there's not a lot of them out there that are giving people a voice in our industry, that are giving them the ability to step on a mic and tell their story. Most of the time, how we digest them is through the medium of photographs, right? So we go on Instagram, we see a photo of someone, but we don't have context. We don't know what their thoughts are. We don't know what they're thinking. The people who have had tremendous success on YouTube initially, we know everything about them because they went to streaming first. And that's why that translates so much faster from a streaming platform into other platforms. But the problem is, because we're obsessed with the product, you have 9,000 guys out there running around doing reviews, being review-based guys, being, like we've talked about, glorified Glock 19 review people. We don't ever get the context of the person. And I think that's the biggest failure of the gun business, period. Because I want to get to know you more. I want to get to know a Julie Galoob more. I want to get to know a Michelle Viscusi more. I want to get to know these people, what makes them tick, what makes them think, because that's how you're going to win people over. Not, hi, here I'm Ryan, SEAL, ninja in a ghillie suit running around, and here's a cool picture of me. Because it's unrelatable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's also a way, not just to talk, to learn more about people, learn more about what they do in the space and their interests, but also for us to talk about politics in some way, right? Because that's an important part. That's part of the war that we fight every day as 2A supporters, is this constant battle with the opposition. And, we need to talk more about it. And so I think what happens too is a lot of people, like I said before, they've never met gun owners, or they've never talked to them. They've never heard them. They don't have any context.
There's no context.
All they think is guns are bad and people who own guns are bad too. And, the more we could talk about it, the more we can humanize ourselves to people. I think that's
100%. It's psychological.
Yep.
Because if all you see is a picture that you went on an Instagram page of someone with a gun, of course you're going to think that person's a maniac because you have no context. But when you get the ability to talk and articulate yourself and have a conversation about what you enjoy about firearms, or what you enjoy about training for self-defense, or what you enjoy about long-range shooting, the passion starts to come out. And that's where someone's going to say, no, I see it like this. I like the ability to defend my family if the response time is low. I like having the ability to control my own fate. I like training. That's okay. It's not a dangerous word. I like being more capable. I like being able to say, hey, I want to take a class. I want to learn what dope is, or I don't know what these things are. I want to learn what they are. And that's okay. And it's showing the sport, it's showing the skill that's involved in it, and it's articulating to the audience, whoever that may be, that there is a willingness to learn and get better and improve. And not only that, learn how to secure your firearm properly, how to defend your family. These things are all important, and they lose context. But I put the onus back on the industry, back on the companies, because I had a very, very forward conversation with a very large company, and he's the number 2 guy in charge. This very large company, and he said, I'm not going to say the names because I try not to do that on this show, but there's a very large influencer who filmed a video portraying the gun as a bump stock. And my exact words to this guy, and he's a titan of the industry. I said, but you created him. Y'all created him. So he took something that you made and took it out of context. We have not built up enough platforms where we can put things back into context by having conversations like this. Yep. And we live constantly chasing it. Like you look at the NRA, they're constantly responding to things Kamala says or things Joe Biden says. We're constantly, there's no offensive. And the best defense is a good offense.
If there's one thing that I could do besides, my businesses in this industry, is exactly what you're talking about. Like, I think if I could facilitate a way to get people who are not gun owners to understand us at least, and I know that kind of sounds a little weird, but you know what I mean? Like, humanize us. What drives me nuts is, you listen to these debates and you got politicians talking about gun owners and guns as being these terrible things. Well, come talk to me. Let's have a conversation about why I enjoy guns. I don't use a gun. Like they pretend that every gun owner is interested in going out and shooting people. And it's like, that's not even close to
furthest
reality.
from the truth.
So let's talk about what we actually want to do with those guns, why we have them, why we believe in them. And like, we're not any different from you guys. We go to Target and shop. We take our kids to school. We do the same things you guys do. We just believe in this Second Amendment. We believe in gun ownership, just like you might like collecting stamps or collecting something else. We just like this. And there's juice behind it too. It's not like we collect guns because they're cool, like stamps or something or coins or whatever. Like there's real juice behind it. It's a Second Amendment right. You know, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people have died at the hands of their governments. That's the primary reason why we have the Second Amendment. So there's real sustenance behind it, but the politicians make it a simple talking point. Guns are bad. People who own guns are bad, and then half the country just kind of follows suit. We need to talk about us as individuals and gun owners more, so those type of people can understand us at least, right? I mean, if you look at what's going on right now with BLM and all this stuff, there's a voice that's happening. I wish that our industry could figure out how to do that the opposite, you know, do that in a way that now there's conversation about gun owners. I feel in some way we're a subculture, just like BLM is presenting their subculture, just like, you know, the gay, the
Antifa,
all this stuff. There's those people are those groups are subcultures in the United States. Second Amendment culture is a subculture that should be recognized.
The reason we don't present it in the best way is because, like I said to you before we started this, a lot of people boil it down to it turns into a Glock 19 review or what's your EDC. They're not willing to have these conversations. I've had battles with companies, and I've explained to them, it can't be about the gun. It has to be about the person. If you 100%. Get it down to the person and you start to have a conversation with the person, Ryan McMillan, you start to have the person on. We haven't talked about buds once. We haven't talked about Ninja SEAL stuff once. Yeah. You know why? It's played out. It's played out. We've heard the stories 50 times. You know that. The last thing you want to sit here is talk about that again. It start stepping up, start talking about the issues, start talking about what affects you, what affects your business, and start to re-educate these people that are out there, these Instagrammers and everybody else, and start to show them, no, I'm a business. I want everybody to come to me and purchase. And if they don't know how to put their finger on the fucking gun, then I'll teach them. Mm-hmm. But don't tell me who I should and shouldn't take money from. Mm-hmm. I want to develop my business. I want to develop myself as a person, and I want to be a beacon of hope for those that are going to come after you. But it's not about your feelings. It's about my business and about what I'm trying to do and move an agenda forward. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to move forward as an industry and as a culture if we keep making it about this rail being 0.1 lighter. We keep making it about, hey, this latest mag, this is the greatest thing ever, or this is going to change the world because the polymer we used is, that's all well and good. That's a spec sheet. That's a spec sheet. And for the aficionado or the high-level guy, that's going to matter. But you know as well as I do, in a booth or in a situation, you have, all right, let me connect you to my spec guy, you know, hey, he's going to walk you through all the finite details.
This is the conundrum of business ownership, maybe even specifically in our industry, because like you said, people who tend to start businesses, at least in this part of the industry, are engineers, right? You're designing something, you're making something, you're creating
your
something,
baby.
Right? So engineers typically aren't super creative. They tend towards the logical side of, you know, the brain structure, not the creative side. And that's, I think that's probably part of why it's been really difficult for people, for our industry to really like have some monster brand, you know. There's been a couple companies who I think have done it really well. I don't know if you know Kevin Brittingham.
Yep. Q.
He's the best there is at, as far as I can tell, at branding. He did it with AAC, then Remington bought him and kind of destroyed AAC's brand, but he had a great brand with AAC, and now he's doing it with the Q. And I think Magpul did it well in the beginning.
In the beginning, the early years, murdered it.
They did it really well, and so those two are really kind of beacons of hope that maybe. And Silencer Co. did it well for a while.
Yep, love those guys, Dewey and those guys.
Man, that's what we. I mean, I don't have that kind of creativity. I need to figure out how to get, as a business owner, you got to figure out, and as a business owner, as a logical type of person, you want to see results. That's the biggest thing. When you're in the creative space of your business, you don't necessarily get quantitative results right away. And it's like, I could spend a lot of money on this and it totally work, because you're always skirting that line of like, of whether this is good or this is over the top.
The tangible thing, if you can get away from ROI for a minute, which is always hard for the engineer owner type, you know, get away from ROI for a minute. If you can remove ROI for 1 minute, you have to say, what is the most efficient way for us to water all these holes? Let's start there. Mm-hmm. Because if we can find an efficient way, because what's the best kill? An efficient kill. So if we can find the most efficient way to do this, that might be a Clint Smithism. I got to give him credit. But if we can find the most efficient way to do things, then that's a win first. So in media, just like and Gary V coined this, not me, it's something I've drawn on the board. If you can create pillar content that you can bleed out into all your other areas that waters those holes, both as a business owner, as a and I put it right out there. I don't keep any of my formulas a secret, that you can put into the different spaces. You can chop up into clips, use as photographs. You can create efficiency in your media programs first. One of the first things I ask every company, Ryan, when I go into them is I say, what's your content creation program? That'll tell me everything I need to know about their media department. If they tell me, well, we do a photo shoot once a quarter, then they have no plan. So your plan is you have no plan. Because all you're doing is taking a static photo. You're not telling your brand story through that. You're not progressing your narrative that way. You're not doing anything. And if you're doing one-off videos once a year, that's not really moving the ball forward. What I look for is companies, at least ones I know that are at least moving in the right direction or successful, is they'll have 3-4 programs that they can say, we're doing this with this series with this shooter. We're doing this with this guy. We have this guy in our building. He's doing this and this and this. And we're watering YouTube that way. And we're watering this that way. And we're watering that way. So I target, or I look at, how efficient are they creating their media? Because that's the first way I'm going to be able to come back to you as an owner and say, here's your return on investment. We spent 40, but we watered all these holes, or we spent whatever the number. Mm-hmm. And the biggest complaint I get from companies is we give a lot of shit away. I get that a lot. And I say, well, stop giving it away. And they look at me sometimes dumbfounded. I'm like, what's the cost of goods of what you're giving away? And they're like, $30,000. I actually had one company say $75,000. Okay, it's a real story. I better use a real one. How do I stop that? I said, first, stop giving it away. Then tell me what the cost of that is, not the retail, the cost. And it was something like 30 grand. I said, okay, imagine if you put that back into your department to create efficient media programs, you know? And then they're like, well, how do we find the right? I said, the trick is finding the right person to hire. That's the trick. And that's where people don't understand bringing in the right talent to run your department and giving them the ability to create. And that's why I think it's going to move more and more towards creators and people that understand how to curate content a lot better. But hiring a photographer and telling them go out and pray, that's not a plan. That's a Band-Aid on an axe wound.
Yeah, especially in today's world. I mean, you need more content, just like you're saying. But I think maybe part of the problem is, you know, we do still have a lot of these old school owners in the industry, and they don't get. Part of the reason is they don't necessarily get the importance of it. And I think secondly, like a position that I might be in more is like I said, I try to quantify the things and the money I spend. And, you know, I don't necessarily know exactly what is going to give me results. I don't know how to create that. I don't know who to hire necessarily. So, you know, those are you talk about it like an expert. You have done this, but us as business owners aren't, you know, we're not necessarily experts in this. And we look at this as kind of like this black hole. We don't really know what to think about it. So sometimes the easiest thing is to avoid it. Right. And so, but we all know it. I shouldn't say we all, but I think a lot of us know it. What you're saying, we know it, but it's really hard to grasp.
I've said on multiple calls, it's funny you say that, where I was like part of the hiring panel, like friends would ask me like, hey, would you sit with them? Yeah, sure. Not a problem. Pay my fee. Like, not a problem. But I've sat on multiple calls and I'll say to the person, it's a question that a lot of owners fear asking. I say, all right, you know, what's your plan? If you were to come in here, what's your plan? It's a simple one. And they say, well, you know, this. And I say, well, pick up your phone. Who's the most influential person you can call to help the brand right now? It tells me a lot about the person, because there's a lot of people out there running around with degrees and a lot of people with fancy backgrounds that maybe worked at big brands, and they can bring a lot of cool stuff in, but it's understanding the difference between what's marketing, what's branding, what's running an influencer ambassador program, what's social media management. And a lot of companies can't afford to hire all those people, so they try to hire one catch-all and drop it in. And that's really a mistake. That person starts at a disadvantage. So a lot of times when I say what companies is, no, you hired me to do this. This is what I was brought into. Those are different things. Advertising is very different than marketing. Advertising is me calling and getting you the front page of Recoil, buying you an ad, and understanding where there's efficiency in the ad space. marketing is something totally different. I always say my theory to companies, or what I say to keep it simple, is if you're really weak in a space and you don't see yourself venturing in there, consider buying an ad there, because that's going to be an easy way to gain some space. Like, a lot of people aren't in the podcasting space. They don't want to be right now. So they buy an ad just to get air cover. Okay, that's fine. It's good. A lot of my business is on the consulting side. So what I like to see them is build out strong programs internally to the point where they don't need somebody like me. They can build an efficiency inside of their building where they can crank out the media. But it's dedicating the right resources, the right time, the right efforts to that, and then the messaging, dialing in the messaging. And that's going to be a moving ball always, because you're always going to fight once you get into the eternals, the old-timers that want to make it about the stock, the people that want to get messaging out there, which that's important, and then so on and so forth. So I say, why not just build out 2 or 3 different programs? One that talks about your passion, whether that's the 2A, whether that's the political, whatever that is. One that is product specific, the QVC, the commercial, because you have to do that anyway, your SKUs. And then the other that might be your fun Q&A, a build show. Right there, you can build out a program on that. And then from that, it's just weaving in B-roll and weaving in everything else. People don't, and we've drawn it up on the board. We've talked about it. It's really, I think people make it more complicated than it needs to be. Now, do you need some back-end people for that? Absolutely. You need a great editor. You need a good web guy. You need some people to help you. You need some social help. And you can get all those people for the right thing. I tell everybody, if you're going to start to stem into marketing, you first need to understand the difference between marketing, advertising, and branding. When Springfield decided to give away a pile of Hellcats, that's a branding play. They're trying to build their brand in a space. Is giving product away good? Yes. You have to cherry pick the certain people that you want to have out there talking about your product. And there always has to be some level of a contract, whether we call it a Texas handshake, an email saying, hey, this is what we're looking for this. This is the trade. I do struggle because I'm always coming back to companies, and the industry's gotten better at this. Just because you give somebody a $600 stock or a muzzle brake, you don't own them. Yep. It's much more expensive. It'd be cheaper for me to say, keep it. You go hire a photographer for $1,000 and you go do your own photo shoot. It's not worth it. But as you want to dial in your messaging and you want to dial in what it is that you're putting out there, it's really important to bring in your team in building. That's when it becomes critical. Yeah. A lot of companies can't do that. I get it. I totally get it. It's hard. It's not easy. And especially, marketing's a funny thing, Ryan, because everybody becomes a marketing expert at some point. Everybody in the building. That's why whenever I've run marketing departments, I'm the first to say to everybody, nobody comes in this room. Keep your fucking genius idea out there. If you have an idea, we can sit down, we can have a meeting, we can talk it through. But you work a machine, you do the, I'm not coming over here telling you how to run CAD. Like, go over there. Everybody becomes an expert. And it dismisses the hours that some people spend honing that skill. And that sometimes is the struggle with inside a company. And that's why sometimes it's good to go outside with it, but it's got to be the right people. Yep. It's a tough one.
Marketing's tough, man. It is. Marketing, advertising, branding, it's a tough one. It's different. When you produce product, there's a process that gets you results. And when you see the results, you can quantify the results. The marketing side of things is totally different. And you just got to be able, I think, like I said, people can, owners focus on that one thing that they're good at, building things. They're logical minded people, but I think, the marketing is what is going to ultimately make your company. Like, that's why AAC did so well. That's why Kevin was a wizard at that. He hit it hard with Q. He did great at AAC. Had that little hiccup in between with SIG, but Kevin was, Kevin was a wizard with that. People don't realize what the SIG thing was. I mean, he was able to go there and drop in a whole silencer like overnight. There's another story behind that, but that's his charm, you know what I mean? And he's another guy, very little background, air quotes, because, I could give two shits about that, but very little, he just knew what was rad. He just had a knack for what was rad. Silencer Co., another one. Dewey, those guys over there early on, they were very good at finding, you brought up Magpul, which was a huge influence on a lot of us, right? Early on, the Dead Presidents, everything, all the stuff they were doing, it was rad. Yep. And when you're building in the garage, it's great. And that's a struggle I always have with a lot of companies, explaining to them,
especially when it pertains, people will call me and they'll say, what's a good price to play for a marketing director? I go, 125, 150,000 a year. And they're like, where do you come? Like they start to panic because companies in that $1 to $3 million range that start to look at that, they can't even fathom that salary. But I'm like, a good marketing guy is going to come in and he's going to make it run so efficient if you ask the right questions at the interview, if you understand at the point of attack where he is. But then they'll go out and they'll hire someone that's never built anything on their own. That always cracks me up. They've never built anything. They just come in, they got 2 degrees or whatever it is. They've never built anything on social media or anything. So I'll ask the question, like, what's their skill? I'm confused. Like, what are they good at then? You know, some guys are great at the back end. There's a place for that. But I try to understand, okay, so you have a guy who's running your social marketing. Has he ever built any pages on his own? What's his plan? I asked the company today. You saw me fighting with them. I'm not going to say the company. The person they hired, I said, well, what's the plan they put together? Oh, we didn't do that yet. How do you hire someone and not have a plan? It's not even logical to me.
Especially if you're going to spend that kind of money on somebody.
Now, am I going to give everybody everything? Am I going to give them the whole soup? No. If somebody hired me tomorrow, I'm not going to give them the whole plan. Just like you wouldn't give them the whole plan for your business. But you can give them at least some bullets, some things you see, a little SWOT analysis. Mm-hmm. Hey, this is what I see. Yep. I'm not going to give you the whole cake. I'll give you some of the ingredients and what I see. But that's why there's other things that I like to do at companies before I even go that far. But it's a different thing. Get into that offline. But this is a whole other quest. But listen, man, I love that. We go on and on. Yeah. Fucking A. Yeah. I love chatting with you.
We just barely hit the surface.
Fucking barely scratched it. You got to come back. Yeah. You make a promise?
Anytime. Absolutely.
Yeah. You got to come back. I loved having you. It's just, we could go on and on. I went on a little rant there towards the end, but I get fired up about this. What do you think is going to happen in the election? Give your prediction.
I think Trump's going to win. I mean, I just can't see Biden's such a weak candidate. He's really weak. And I know that there's Democrats who are going to vote for Democrats no matter who it was. But, God, I just cannot believe that Biden can win this. I mean, maybe he can, but, man, he's a terrible candidate.
Oof.
For a Democrat, they had better candidates to pick from, and I don't know how that whole process works. I don't know how the Democrats choose the nominee.
Oh, it was a horse trade in the end.
Goodness gracious,
we all know that.
Biden is like and because he's a kind of a puppet, I think maybe that's why they chose him.
I think Cory Booker would have been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think Cory Booker would have been an interesting candidate, but I don't. The party just reverted back to what it knows best, an old white guy.
Yeah.
Honest to God. I mean, that's what it reverted back to.
Well, the thing that drives me nuts the most is I'm a big proponent of choose the best person. I don't care what your color is. I don't care what your sex is. I don't care any of that crap, right? Choose the best person for the job. What drove me nuts is that right off the bat, Joe Biden's I'm choosing a black woman for president. There was no other candidates. Why don't you just pick the best person? But that just shows you
pandering.
It's pandering. It's just It's just all a game.
I think what they were interested in was Biden's appeal to black and brown single mothers in the southern states because he won South Carolina that way, and I think that's what they were after is restoring that base. For whatever reason, he's had success in that space, and that's what's got him elected multiple times. I think that was the appeal. When you look at all the candidates, I think it was pretty clear everyone else was a disaster. I mean, Booker would have been interesting if they ever. The problem with Tulsi was she was from Hawaii. She just didn't carry enough, and she's a dream candidate, but she just doesn't carry enough. Hawaii's not going to bring you a lot.
She was a good candidate. I thought
she would have scared the shit out of me.
What's the guy? I never remember his name. Who Elon Musk?
The Asian guy. Yeah, he's interesting.
They just he never got any speaking time, and but he was, he was articulate, he was thoughtful, he was
interesting.
He could have been an interesting candidate for sure. Maybe he didn't have enough horsepower, but he was. I mean, he's got to be. I mean, maybe it's Biden's been around for 40-something years. Maybe that carries a lot of weight as far as his connections. And
it's inside baseball.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, listen, man, let everybody know where they can find you and how they can contact Grayboe.
Okay. Grayboe.com, Grayboe.com. That's the website. We're all over social media. We've got an Instagram. We've got Facebook. We've got YouTube. So it's just /Grayboe on all of those. So that's the way you can get a hold of Grayboe. I also have personal Instagram too, Ryan McMillan. Go search me. Yeah, that's it.
It's amazing. I love the product line, everything about it. I think you're going to do big things. I love your attitude too. I mean, we could talk for fucking days. I love this stuff. I appreciate you coming out. I really do.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Genuinely do. Taking the time. Thank you for your service. Appreciate everything that you guys do. It means a lot to me personally. Can't thank you enough. I'm going to put the links down below for Grayboe. Go check Ryan out. Everything he's doing over there is fucking badass. There's so much shit we can get into. We're going to do another one. We're going to do a part 2 for sure. I want to thank the sponsors. Head over to www.johnbartoloshow.com. All the sponsors listed there that support the show, particularly Gallo Tech Walls for the walls behind us, Rhino Metals for all the tables, Blackwater Ammunition, and, of course, Galco Holsters. Go check out Galco. Love them. Everything about them. I appreciate them. All the sponsors. Leave reviews. I do a terrible job asking for reviews. Please leave some reviews. Can't thank everyone who leaves reviews enough. Hopefully this was good, man.
I enjoyed it, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Dude, awesome. Anytime. Fuck. It's engaging on a deeper level. But I want to thank everybody. I want to put all the links down below again for Grayboe and for Ryan. Go check them out. And, to everybody listening, there's a lot of disclaimers on all of this stuff because we talk about a lot of inside baseball and stuff, and I get it. But we're passionate about the industry, and we want to see it progress forward. And we're open to debate. Anybody can come on that doesn't agree or agrees to disagree. We're willing to talk about it. Ryan can be on that panel. He's a good voice. Have to. Appreciate him. All right.